everybody, and welcome to the BasuandGodin notebook. So, to everybody who's not here at Hurley's on this Thursday night, well, it's our first ever live podcast. We're very, very happy to have so many of you here. So all the people who are watching us on YouTube, we might not be looking at the camera all that often because we've got actual people to talk to. But thanks a lot for tuning in, nonetheless. Arpin, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm doing the episode with a beer, as I mentioned to everyone in here. I'm going to show the people watching tomorrow. I don't do this regularly, but we are at Hurley's Irish Pub. We've been very gracious hosts, and we just finished watching the Devils-Canadiens game. Obviously, the Canadiens lose in overtime. Frankly, they get a point that they probably shouldn't have. So positive overall, I think, for the Canadiens. But here we are to talk about this week, and I think this week is sort of the first mini lull of the season for the Canadiens. Obviously, Tuesday against Philly, Martin St. Louis comes out and calls it the worst game of the season. He was not wrong. It's just rare that he does that they had to have been very bad for him to come out and do that. And tonight in New Jersey, while they weren't that bad, and they weren't making the mistakes that they made previously and on Tuesday, they were not necessarily good either. The two goals that they got before taking the lead in the third were kind of gifts from,
especially Jake Evans.
Well, Jake Evans from Jacob Markstrom, but even Kirby Dach's goal, that's a bounce that you get. And so 5-on-5, I didn't find them to be all that impactful consistently. They had moments throughout the game, but if you want to focus on positives, the penalty kill was really good against a really, really good power play. But you got 8 minutes left. You're up a goal on the road. Don't really deserve to be there. They seem to be doing all the things you should be doing in that situation, and then they get to 6-on-5, and again, 6-on-5 burns them. And I hate to be a pisser about this, but ask Martin St. Louis in training camp, are you ever going to work on 6-on-5? Yeah, maybe tomorrow. He just kind of said jokingly as he went into the dressing room. And then Nick Suzuki the other night, I guess that was in Seattle, said we haven't really worked on 6-on-5. And here you go. They're just giving up goals 6-on-5 when they have an opportunity to get 2 points. Instead, they wind up with 1. It's a thing. These are like Martin St. Louis was talking about details after Tuesday's game. These are details that winning teams focus on. Now, to be fair to Marty, they're not at a stage of their development as a team where you can devote, 20 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour to this in training camp. They have things that they need to establish and settle and really pin down as a team. But
at the same time, I mean, you talk about 6-on-5. If it wasn't for Mike Matheson, who blocked a shot and basically stopped playing, and then Jakub Dobeš, who made the first save, had the puck right in front of him, had he stopped the puck and called a whistle, we would not be discussing that. So I'm not sure to which extent, the fact that they're...
Well, but they scored. I mean,
of course they did.
They didn't hold the lead. I mean, what's been the theme of the season is their inability to hold a third period lead. They didn't necessarily, again, deserve that third period lead, but they had one, and they were doing everything. Like, while the game was at 5-on-5 with them in the lead, I thought they played actually a really smart game. They did not do anything there. A couple of moments that Alex Carrier cross-ice pass that turned into an icing, like that was not smart in that situation. But, down a man 6-on-5 has been a thing, and these are the kinds of things. Do you remember when Guy Boucher was assistant coaching the Leafs? I remember covering a game right at the end of preseason. Sheldon Keefe was talking about what Guy Boucher did during training camp, and these are the things he was doing. 6-on-5, 5-on-6, all these specialty situations, 4-on-3, all these things that you don't have time to work on during the season. And, the Canadiens are maybe not at a stage where they need to be focusing on those things. Their 5-on-5 play remains focus number one and is a work in progress, as we've seen this week. But they had a chance to steal 2 points in New Jersey tonight if they were able to lock that down, and they were a minute away from doing it. but ultimately didn't. And that's, what does Marty love to say? Like, a one-off is one thing, but a trend is another. Well, this is a trend.
Regarding the 6-on-5, I like their even strength
in general.
Yeah, but I like their play 5-on-5 right after they took the lead. Nick Suzuki's line had a very, very good shift, or they had a scoring chance, but mainly they made sure that the Devils would not take their rhythm back into the game, and they slowed down the Devils. They spent a lot of time in the offensive zone. It was not like an especially dangerous shift, but it was really the sort of shift that you have the lead, you're on the road, there's only a few minutes left. That's what the Canadiens needed. Fortunately, the 6-on-5 situation, I get you there. The Devils had given up 18 goals in their previous 4 games. They were adamant that they wanted to tighten things up defensively, and they sure did against the Canadiens. They were fast. I thought that especially the first half of the game, they were pressing the Canadiens constantly, and I feel as though the Habs I had a hard time regrouping and creating offense off the rush. But, they stuck with it, and eventually the bounces went their way. It's funny that the first game came from Cody Glass that we see, popping up here and there in different organizations, for Pittsburgh, with Nashville, now with New Jersey. To think that at first he was the target that the Canadiens wanted, that Marc Bergevin wanted in that trade for Max Pacioretty, and they had to settle for a guy named Nick Suzuki. How fortunate was that?
He was their third pick.
Yeah, because
they wanted Eric Brandstrom to play with Shea Weber at the time. And they basically told Vegas, give us any one of your first-round picks. And Vegas chose Suzuki.
Well, Glass
was
seemingly off the table. And between Brandstrom and Suzuki, the Canadiens ended up with their eventual captain. So that's great, because Brandstrom is playing in Europe now. Something like that.
He is, but Cody Glass and Nick Suzuki became like good friends during, they were the first, that was the first Vegas draft.
Yeah. And
they were the first people to go see the new, the rink and the practice facility, which was still under construction at the time. And like, the three of them, Brandstrom, Glass, and Suzuki, thought they were going to be the future of the Vegas Golden Knights. And little did they know that the Vegas Golden Knights do not keep their first round picks, and they trade them all away. And so, very, very good bounce for the Marc Bergevin regime, because they did not necessarily identify him as a target. But, and I thought he had a so-so game tonight. He definitely did not have a great game Tuesday. He's also, and as he goes, the Canadiens go.
Talk about Nick, right?
Yeah, not Cody Glass. I'm talking about Nick. He had spurts. You mentioned this, like there were shifts where that line was dominant tonight. But I think he too is starting to attract much more attention from opponents, and they are a focal point of any game plan against them, which has been the case since last season. But the way they've played up until this week, it makes it clear that not only are they the focus, but if we neutralize them, the rest of the lineup's not going to hurt you. Like if you're facing the Canadiens, you take your chances with the rest of the lineup. As good as Demidov is, as good as Dach looks, as good as, and frankly, it's funny that Evan scored and that was a gift, but that line's not really a factor offensively. And so if that Suzuki line doesn't have it on a given night, the 5-on-5 game just kind of follows for the Canadiens.
Yeah, well, that's why the whole chatter about second line center is not about to go away. Because you're going to try to find
tonight. I like Dach tonight.
Secondary scoring. Yeah, sure. He was he's continuing on his comeback tour. Speaking of Suzuki's line, I thought some of the best chances and the best moments from that line were actually defensive plays from Cole Caulfield that he turned into offensive chances. Yeah. We saw that, I think, on 3 separate occasions, and got a breakaway out of it. I mean, he was pretty good. And Nick had a saucer backhand pass in front in the slot for Slav in the third. That could have been also probably the final nail in the Devils' coffin, because I think the Canadiens had the lead at that time already, 3-2. But generally, I mean, want to take you to the goaltending aspect, because there was a lot of debate regarding Samuel Montembeault following the game in Philadelphia. First, a lot of fans were saying, well, how come they're playing Montembeault? It should be Dobesh, because Dobesh has been the better goalie. Controversial outing from Montembeault, gave up 3 goals on 6 shots, and then proceeded to stop, I think, 31 shots in a row, or 36 out of 37.
30. Yeah.
But he was stellar, kept the team in the game, and you could argue that it could be the sort of start that could turn his season around. But logically, it was a surprise to nobody that Dobesh was back in the net tonight. And, even though he took the loss, but more than just the goals that he gave up, there's also the manner in which he made some of his saves. And I thought that he was a little too active and noisy in front of his net compared to what we've seen so far since the beginning of the season. But where would you describe that the situation in goal is at after those 2 games this week?
I don't think these 2 games, the situation in goal in general is not dependent on a single game or 2 games or whatever. I understand people saying, well, Dobesh is playing better, just play him. If the Canadiens are smart, and I think Marty St-Louis is smart about this, is this team's not going anywhere unless Sam Montembeault finds his game. And Tuesday night was the first indication that he has. And you remember when we were like funnily kind of joking that maybe the Canadiens should give up more shots and Sam will play better?
Yeah.
And look at what happened on Tuesday. They give up a ton of shots. They give up 40 for the first time this year. And all of a sudden, old school Sam Montembeault shows up, and he's making saves left, right, and center, backdoor plays. The 2 saves on Dvorak at the end of the second period to prevent that momentum swing. He had a great
got stronger as the game went on.
Well, he got stronger the more shots he saw.
Yeah.
And he even said it. Like, he said it before. Like, it's hard, we didn't give up that many shots. I wasn't able to get back. Like, when you give up a bad goal, what you want is more shots. You want to get right back into the game. You don't want to sit there and think about it, which is what, when the Canadiens are on their game, and they have been by and large before this week, he's had a lot of time to think. For the first time in his career as a Canadian, he spends time in his crease thinking.
Yeah.
And when those thoughts are negative, I think he's learning how to manage that. Like, he's never really experienced this, because prior to coming to Montreal, he was not the number 1 goalie. Now he's the number 1 goalie for the first time. He's not performing up to his standards or what his teammates expect of him. And so when you give up a bad goal and you just have to ruminate over it, the chances of you giving up another bad goal increase. I'm not saying the Canadiens should just allow teams to pelt shots at Sam Montembeault, but there is a longer-term play here where Marty cannot be, well, we're just going to play the better goalie and Sam's going to sit for a while. Like, it's just not realistic. Like, Dobesh could very well wind up becoming a better goalie than Sam Montembeault. I'm not convinced, a bit more than a dozen games into the season, that is currently the case, despite how well Dobesh has played and despite how poorly Montembeault has played. Track record matters for something. And I feel like, especially for a head coach like Marty, who does take that into account. And so I think, this week, obviously Dobesh showed himself to be somewhat fallible tonight. That doesn't mean that he's all of a sudden garbage. Sam Montembeault, his start to the season doesn't mean he's all of a sudden garbage. There's more to it. There's more data involved with him that suggests that that's not the case. And he just has a bad stretch, and it happens to be at the start of the season instead of in January. And so I think Marty needs to nurture his revival for the long-term betterment of the team, because it's not true that they're going to ride Dobesh for 60 games and make it to the playoffs. Like, that's not it's not a real thing that's going to happen.
No, how often does it really happen with rookie goalies anyway? Very, very.
Yeah,
it's very seldom. Yeah. So if a backup goalie who's playing very well gets a few more starts because of that, it allows your number 1 to regroup and find his game. Because if the Canadiens just ride Dobesh and at some point he cools down, if you have not given the chance for Montembeault to bounce back, then you're out of options. So you have to make sure, you have to find a way in practice time, in the workload in front of the net, to bring both of your goalies at their best respective levels. And Dobesh right now is giving the Canadiens exactly what they hope for, but you have to be able to bring Montembeault back so that you have those two goalies that are equally good options. But if it's going to be risky, we look at the way that Dobesh played in New Jersey, if you decide to ride him regularly in that state, I think that it's a risky proposition. So it could be just a 50-50, situation for the time being, and I would be okay with that. But honestly, the Canadiens are going back to Montreal. They're going to host the Utah Mammoth on Saturday. I wouldn't be surprised to see Montembeault back in net.
Well, this is there are tendencies for Marty that you can identify, and he definitely puts more value on Saturday night home games in terms of who gets them. The veteran goalie like Jake Allen for a while got them when Sam Montembeault was trying to kind of get higher up into the goalie hierarchy. It's a prestige thing for Marty, definitely starting at home on a Saturday night, and that game against Utah is really a fascinating, to me, kind of matchup of two teams that are remarkably similar in terms of where they're at, what their future looks like, who's driving the bus on each team. It's their young stars. This is Cooley versus Slafkovsky, which has never really been a thing, but it is now because Cooley's fantastic. And, I don't think the Canadiens have regret taking Yuri Slafkovsky, but I can guarantee you one thing: Yuri Slafkovsky is aware of Logan Cooley being on the other side. And and probably Logan Cooley is aware of Yuri Slafkovsky being on the other side. We talked to all three of the primary candidates to go number one that year at the Combine. And while Shane kind of assumed he was going to go number one, so his temperament was a little different. The most defiant of the three was Logan Cooley, for sure. And the guy who might potentially have a chip on his shoulder as a result is probably Logan Cooley. But anyhow, all that has nothing to do with the goaltending situation. But to me, I think the goaltending situation has taken on far too much importance in the general discourse around this team.
Well, we were out of practice because of Carey Price. It didn't Montreal goalie controversy.
I know,
come on.
But this is the beauty of this team, and this is what the market should be embracing. Is for the first time since the mid '80s, the best players on this team are not the goalie. So let's talk about someone other than the goalie, because we've had 2 generations of fans who have grown up just knowing a goalie as the best player on the team. The Canadiens have tons of other good players on this team, and they've had a rough week. Let's not hide it. They've not been up to the standard that they set before this week on a consistent basis. And until that happens, the Canadiens are not going to be in a position to win as many games. And frankly, even when they were winning games, what were we saying? They're blowing leads. They're going to overtime all the time. They only have 4 regulation wins. They still only have 4 regulation wins. And so there were warning signs and red lights and indications that a lull was coming. And so this is really a really big test, I think, for this team. Is the game Saturday, but even if they lose that, how quickly can they nip this in the bud? Last year was a season that was defined by streaks. There were winning streaks, there were losing streaks. The losing streaks were hard to cut. The winning streaks went on much longer than anyone expected, to their credit, but this is not a formula for consistent participation in the playoffs. What you want is to cut these things off at the pass. And frankly, the game in Jersey, as meh as it was from the Canadiens, they were in a position to get 2 points. They got a point. They still didn't. It still wasn't a lost trip, Whereas I think normally in the past few years, if they had played the way they did in Jersey, they would have been blown out of the water. It really would not have been a very pretty sight. Kudos to the Canadiens penalty kill, though.
Yeah,
that's a really big positive. Jersey came in with one of the better power plays in the league, and the Canadiens penalty kill was really, really solid, and that's also a good development for them.
They had They were at 71% in the previous 5 games. They had allowed 6 goals in the last 21 power plays from the other team, which is not great. But Mike Matheson was absolutely stellar tonight on the PK. Good old Arbor Xhekaj had some shifts also on the PK.
And we're gonna get to him in a moment.
Yeah. But this was a strong outing from the PK. I agree with you there. Also, what's the? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Why don't we go to Arbor? Because honestly, it's been a talking point tonight. Struble in the third period gets 2 consecutive penalties, and it's funny because there's in this long-lasting internal competition between the two guys, Struble and Xhekaj. It seems that very often Struble has shown that he could really get few very good games in a row, but then all of a sudden, there's something that happens and he's not quite there. There was that penalty that proved costly in Seattle, and tonight the game is tied and he gets 2 bad penalties, especially the second one. So when he ended up I think it was his glove or his stick in the face of Paul Cotter, but
it was a stick.
It was a stick, yeah. So
but
once again,
his hands were high. Like that's a preventable penalty in that situation.
So he puts his team in trouble at the worst times, but as a result, what did we see from Arbor Xhekaj? Probably one of his best periods in a long time, probably of the season, because he played a regular shift.
Easily as a season, yeah.
Regular shift, played on the PK, asserted himself, did not make bad decisions. So, as much as we like to debate the goalies, Struble versus Xhekaj is an eternal debate too. And honestly, we see Caden Gooley, who has started skating with his equipment on. He might be a couple of weeks away from returning. But I suspect that when he comes back, we will not have more clarity on who really deserves long-term to be the Canadiens' 6th defenseman between those 2 guys. Because even though Struble might have a bigger toolbox and more things that he can do to help the Canadiens, he has not, yet again, he has not run away with it.
I disagree. I mean, I think, yes, there was a penalty in Seattle. Yes, there were 2 penalties tonight, but so often there was a shift tonight. I think it was in the first period, but anyhow, the Suzuki line was kind of cooking in the offensive zone. Struble was out there with Hudson. Struble made 2 or 3 plays to make sure that shift continued in the offensive zone. So many times I watched Struble do things on the ice, and I'm like, could Arbor have done that? And the answer is often no. And so I agree that Struble can't be putting the team in bad situations, and that's something that you need to clean up. But the far larger data set is, how does he play at 5-on-5? How does he support the way that the Canadiens play? How does he stylistically fit? And to be honest, to me, I always kind of pinpointed the trip at the end of November as the ideal time to, the Canadiens can only hope so, for Caden Gooley to come back, right? That'll be 5 weeks since the injury. They said 4 to 6 when they leave to go on what should be a pretty difficult trip. Utah, Vegas, Denver at the end, in 3 games in 4 nights at the end of November. So that's kind of the timeline that Struble and Xhekaj have to win that job. Because obviously when Gooley shows up, and to me, Struble by and large has done that. To me, Struble, despite what happened tonight, because other than the penalties, I thought he was the better player of the 2. He really was.
And the ice time shows, right? So Xhekaj played a little less than 11 minutes, and Struble, just like usual, is always
Struble can
16,
do things that Arbor can't do. It's just the reality. And the one thing that Arbor can do that Struble can't, Struble knocked the hell out of Nick Cousins the other night. He helped himself in that regard. And so it's to me, it's becoming more and more clear, and that's why it's going to become an issue, because if there's 2 things that the fan base and the general discourse that takes up way more space than it probably should. One is the goaltending situation, and 2 is for sure Arbor Xhekaj just in general, because there is this vision and there is this hope and there's this love of what he represents. He is a guy who can play a regular shift and he can beat people up, and he's really good at beating people up, and that's great. It's good to have that. I'm not discounting that. But ultimately, and especially as you go further and further along in the season, what Struble brings to the table is going to be more valuable than what Arbor brings to the table, unless we see a shift. And frankly, tonight was a good step in that direction for Arbor Xhekaj. He had like a legitimately good third period, and that's after like not getting on the ice a whole lot in the first period. There were a lot of penalties called. Like, it was a wonky night for him, but he did well, and he has to have more nights like that. He has to have more periods like that. But it's quite clear that this coaching staff does not really trust him as much as they trust Struble. Struble gets out there in difficult, tight situations, and Xhekaj has trouble getting out there in those situations.
But if that was the case, why wouldn't they start trying to play Struble on the PK instead of Xhekaj? You know, knowing that if he's got that lead over Arbor, well, I think it would be a good opportunity, even whether it's when you want to rest one of your top PKers or defensemen in the box. You know, you need another defenseman. You send Struble out there, you know, but because it's not as if, Xhekaj's got a little bit more of an experience on the PK than Struble does. But if you give Struble repetitions on the PK and he does okay, then that definitely gives him a strong hole in that position.
Well, I think tonight specifically it's because of the penalties that Struble took. But
I mean, it's been consistent since the beginning of the season. Like when there was a need for another defenseman, it was not Struble, it was Xhekaj.
Yeah. Has it been that consistent that Xhekaj gets out there? I mean, the fact that either Struble or Xhekaj get out on the penalty kill.
Oh, it's not. I'm not saying that it's often.
It's been a rarity, you know. Like it's something that they need to address and fix. Like, frankly, it's the other night. I would have loved to just have like a little window into Martin St. Louis' brain when Noah Dobson and Mike Madsen were sitting in the penalty box at the same time, and just think I would love to have just gotten like a little, you know, like in the cartoons, you get this little thought bubble, and like you just get to see like what he's like, and it would just be like a rain cloud, or like just raining on his head. Like, it was just literally the worst case scenario. And he was asked about it after the game, and he chuckled. He's like, "Yeah, that's not good." I was like, "Yeah, well, it's not good when you're not developing more guys."
I'd like to see him actually. I'd like to see Marty walk behind the bench and the cloud follows him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Just total grouch mode. Like, this is not a situation we are equipped to handle as a team. Like, it wasn't. Of course, it's 5-on-3. That's tough. But you have those two guys in the penalty box. They have not given enough reps to Xhekaj or Struble.
No, Xhekaj has got, before tonight, he had 4 minutes 36 total shorthanded.
Right. Where's Struble at?
3 seconds.
3 seconds.
So that's pale in comparison to Matheson, who's over 53 minutes.
Yeah.
And who's been really like a workhorse on.
And he is, I would say, the number one reason why the PK was perfect tonight.
But Alexandre Carrier too was pretty solid. He had a shift at some point that lasted over 3 minutes. But I mean, you got the personnel.
It's not a good thing, by the way. The shift that lasts over 3 minutes. It's not like you don't wear that like a badge of honor. Like that's not the goal when you're on the penalty kill. But still, yes.
No,
I get it.
No, that's right. And it means also that once the penalty was over, he could not change. So
yeah.
So there's that too. Looking. There was also, you mentioned earlier that you like Kirby Dach's game.
Yes.
I'm not sure. Did we? Because we tend to talk a lot about Kirby Dach on the podcast. Not sure if we touched on his situation in the last one on Monday, but after a game where he scored 2 against Philly, and tonight we saw a few shifts where, there was this penalty where it didn't break. He didn't break in front of the goalie, ended up with goalie interference, but he was right there in front of the net to try to create some offense. Deflected a shot that ended up, being his goal. What is it?
Deflected is being generous.
It touched him.
Yes.
He was touched by the grace of rubber.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I mean, more and more. I mean, I know that everybody's happy with the way that Kapanen has been playing so far this season, that his line has been somewhat the second line. But let's face it, I think that between Dach and Kapanen, the likelier of the two that could be your legitimate second line center by the end of the season is Dach. But you need for him to play games, and he needs to find a level of consistency that overall has been lacking. But at least I feel as though finally it's trending in the right direction.
It is. This is another thing that takes up a lot of. I'm just.
Well, we're ticking the boxes.
We're ticking the boxes of things that take up a lot of oxygen in the Canadiens universe. And so, this notion that Demidov should be playing with Dach and Bolduc, which we've actually espoused many times on the show.
Yeah.
It's coming. It's not coming to a head at all. I don't think actually, because I do think that. How many times we have to hear Marty say that we're going to come in waves to know that he's trying to balance out whatever talent he has up front. That's what he's trying to do. Whether that's right or wrong is not for me to say, but that's his intent. With loading up, quote unquote, Dach, Bolduc, and Demidov hurt that intent because honestly, when you're making up lines, you have to keep in mind how you're going to deploy them when you make them. When you formulate them. And so if your intention is to come in waves and give more or less balanced ice time to every line that's not centered by Nick Suzuki, then maybe that's not the answer. Maybe keeping Demidov where he is and not messing with something that, more or less has worked and is working and is getting better. You remember at the beginning of the season, like all of their, not just their numbers, but the eye tests, they were playing in their defensive zone all the time. They never had the puck. Now it's not like that. It's almost become the opposite. And so that line's growing. Dach is also growing. Bolduc is growing. We had sort of an interesting conversation with him on I guess it was Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I talked to him on Saturday morning about Kirby. Actually, I went to him to talk about Kirby, and I was like, "What have you seen since Kirby's been back in the lineup? About his progression?" He's like, "I have no worries about Kirby Dach. I'm not concerned. He's like totally comfortable." And then it just popped in my head. I'm like, "Well, what about you?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm fine." Well, I'm fine. And then he just went on this thing where he's like, "No, like beginning of the season, I was fine. I'm not fine anymore. I'm not doing this. And then it went out, 10 hours later and did all those things and was amazing. Yes, Ottawa in the first period, at least, actually didn't really maintain it over 3 periods. And so then Tuesday morning, I go up to him and I'm like, "Hey, remember what you said on Saturday?" And he goes, "That's pretty good, man. To say it on a morning and then to go out and do it that night, that's pretty good." He's like, yeah. And he was pretty proud of himself. He was like,
well, rightfully so. I mean, yeah. It's really.
But that's the thing that's interesting is that it's you can't just do that all the like. It's not to play the way that he played on Saturday. And I think Kirby falls into the same category. Like everyone knows that Kirby Dach is at his best when he's angry. When he has a certain level of violence to his game, and he's just like he's in guys' faces, he's being aggressive, he's doing cheap shotty things behind the play, like all these things. That's when he's at his best. But you need to be physically confident. You need to be mentally confident. Your timing needs to be down. You need to feel normal to get there. And when Marty keeps saying he's ressemble de plus en plus, like he's looking more and more like himself, I agree with that. Like he is, and he's starting to get like honestly, like that goalie interference penalty tonight, that was dumb. But I was kind of like, if I'm Marty, I'm like, you know what? I don't mind that so much. Like go get your nose dirty in there. Like, fine, you took a penalty, but the intent was good. You're in there, you're mucking it up, good. Like, that's a good sign. Like, you're getting to somewhere that I need you to get to. You got to do it smarter than that. But that was a bad result from a good intention, right? And so it's just like, I think that's a positive for him.
I feel as though the aggressiveness and the physicality that we see from time to time from Dach, we see it mainly in the offensive zone. along the boards. That's
He's
where
never been the greatest defensive player in the world.
No, I know, but I mean, it's not as though this is a physicality or an intensity that you can see necessarily in all three zones. It's when he's effective and he's got offensive zone time. That's where it expresses himself. So I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg. If he's aggressive, hence it makes for more offensive zone time, or if he's got more offensive zone time, it might lead to him being more physical. It's one or the other, but I feel as though it's really when he works down low that he gets this FU in his game, that he tends to battle for pucks and gets nasty a little bit.
Well, I think the correlation in Kirby's game is that when he's carrying more pucks through the neutral zone, that leads to more offensive zone time, and that leads to more of the FU in his game. But I think that's the line. But he needs support in his own end. For sure that he needs players playing with him that can support him in the defensive zone. Because he has shifts where he's very effective, and he has shifts where he just loses his man, like he did in Edmonton, and he's just watching a guy score next to him, like it happens. So that's kind of the other thing, I'm sure, in Marty's mind. And frankly, I watched Demidov play. I don't think he's a problem defensively, right? But there's a certain level of Demidov has a burden of proof to prove that he can play at that end of the ice with this coach.
Yeah,
he keeps bringing it up. That the reason why he waited to put him on the power play is because he wanted to see if he could commit himself to playing on the defensive side of the puck, and he said he's done that. So he got on the first power play. But a player that you're not sure about that with, I'm not sure you're going to run to put him with Kirby. Like Kapanen and to a lesser extent Newhook, I think are seen as a support system for Demidov right now in Marty's eyes. Now, again,
because they're more reliable defensively.
Because they're more reliable defensively.
Yes. And even maybe Budzik for that matter.
Yeah, I think Budzik in St. Louis showed some pretty decent defensive awareness at the end of the season. Less so this season, but new team, new environment. I think that'll come. But really, Kirby needs that support. Like Gallagher is obviously a very different type of support than Demidov would provide.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So regarding the second line center debate, which is ongoing and raging for the whole season, so stay tuned because it will be a talking point in March too. But Elliot Friedman was saying on Wednesday that he thinks that if it comes to a point where Nazem Kadri is on the market, Montreal would be very high on that list. I think it goes to show how rare centermen are, on the market in terms of availability. Kadri just played his 1,000 game on Wednesday night.
He did.
Yeah, but
his daughter read the starting lineup. It was one of the cuter things I've seen.
Nice.
Yeah, it was very nice. Yeah.
So he's got 3 more years after this one at $7 million a year. He's 35 years old. Still can play. For his 1,000 game, he managed to score a goal. Actually, he helped the Flames in a rather rare win so far this season. Even though he's 35, you basically, not quote unquote waste assets, but spend a lot of your ammo on a guy like that. Would you see him as a solution now that McTavish has signed, now that Crosby seems more unlikely than ever with the way that the Penguins started their season? Even the Islanders have started, stronger than some would have predicted, and Bo Horvat is absolutely on fire. There's just not that many guys that could help the Canadiens. And I understand that they look in Michigan and they see Michael H. there, who's been having a good start to the season. But I find personally that if they think that the way to go would be to trust that that position would eventually be filled by a guy who's in his second year in college and who has not played professional yet, it's very risky. And Michael Hage might be that guy eventually, but it'll be way down the road. We're talking like how many years would it stay?
It's a similar conversation to what we talked about with Reinbacher, right? And in regards to Matheson.
Yeah.
We've talked about it a lot, and obviously the future top four of the Canadiens defense until proven otherwise, would include Reinbacher, Hudson, Gooley, and Dobson. But again, when you have an impending unrestricted free agent, Mike Matheson, are you banking on David Reinbacher being a top 4 defenseman next year? Probably not. The year after? Maybe not. Probably the year after that, right? And so I think in Michael Hage's case, you're talking minimum that. Like, honestly, like, he is, for him to become like a legitimate second line center on this team, it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, he's a supremely talented player, and I think last year was actually really beneficial for him to like learn how to take on the challenge of being the number one target of the opposing team night after night. And when you're facing players who are in their early to in some cases mid-20s when you're playing the NCAA, so that was good for him. It wasn't easy. He had difficult nights. He was the focal point, physically, defensively, in many different ways. Now he has more support in terms of there's more talent on the team now.
Yeah.
I would be pretty surprised if he did not sign his entry-level deal after this season. But to go from that to be like he's in our top 6 and he's running our second line is not a reasonable thing to plan around.
Well, if the Canadiens were starting their rebuild, that'd be one thing.
Well,
but they're entering a competitive window, and they cannot be sure that he's going to be a centerman at the NHL.
You can't plan around it.
That's it.
You can't plan around it. And you can plan around the fact
that it could be a cherry on top of the, it could be the icing on the cake.
Yeah, but
eventually,
if he becomes a top 6 center, it's not happening anytime soon. Like, there's going to be time for him. He's going to need time. Like, he might start on the wing. Like Nick Suzuki, remember, was a 4th-line winger when he started playing for the Montreal Canadiens. Like, this is a process here. You don't just walk into the NHL out of college and become a second-line center. So it's, frankly, Kadri's contract is kind of the perfect length in terms of making sure that Hage has time to work his way into the NHL and become that guy. The question is Kadri going to be this good that long? And very possibly won't be. The other thing about Kadri is that $7 million is not a prohibitive number anymore. Like, you're paying your second line center $7 million in a cap like this, you're doing pretty well. Like, that's and frankly, if you're paying your top 2 centers less than $15 million, you're doing very well. So it's like it really fits. But I think our friend Mathias Brunet had a piece in La Presse saying that they're not going to go after any centers in their mid-30s. So there's conflicting information floating around. But I do think that if they can find some help, perhaps a bit shorter term than Kadri would be more comforting to this administration. But again, supply and demand, market forces, there's not going to be a huge supply of centers that can help you right away as well as Kadri can. So
no, but the Canadiens are in a better spot than a lot of teams in terms of what they can offer. If there's an auction for a centerman who becomes available, I like the chances of the Canadiens of netting that player because of the assets they can dangle. And I mean,
right, but Kadri, then they're kissing goodbye to the ultimate.
Yes,
the ultimate prize.
But the ultimate prize they probably will never be available. So
I don't know. I mean, after the season, I don't think it's going to be available this season, but after the season, it's possible. You're talking about David Kampf, right? Yes. Yeah. Everybody's favorite second line center. But that's the tricky spot that they're in, is that yes, they have the assets, but they don't have an infinite supply of it.
Nope.
And it's not that it's getting less value, that's not true, but the valuable pieces, there's only a few of them, right? And there's going to be some real philosophical decisions to make, like, is 2 years or 3 years or 4 years of Sidney Crosby worth Hage?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's you would think that's a no-brainer, no, but at some point you have to take a step in a rebuild, and you can't just keep cultivating prospects and waiting for them to develop and all that stuff. Like, at some point you got to hit it into overdrive. I don't know if they're at that point just yet, but as this relates to Dach, I don't think it relates to Dach. That's the thing. Like, the good thing about seeing Kirby Dach play this well is you can have him play this well and still go get that center. And it doesn't mean that he has to replace Dach in the lineup, it just means that Dach doesn't have to play center anymore.
Yeah.
And you can have Dach playing on a wing and be effective and be good. It might even help him. Like, he likes playing in center, and he's always claimed that to be the case. He does legitimately skate the puck up the ice, the middle of the ice, very, very well when he's at his best. But I don't think whatever Kirby Dach does this season, it's not going to change the priority of the Canadiens to try and go out and find a center that can support Suzuki as a second-line center. I don't think the only thing that'll change is their decision on what to offer him as far as his next contract's concerned.
Yeah, Kadri, 35, he's a left-handed shot, so that's interesting. Scored 35 goals last season, so he's still productive and capable. He's also a very ferocious competitor, so come playoff time, that's the sort of game that you want to have. So that part really attracts me. The 3 years left on his contract, it's a bit of an issue. There's a team that's really struggling right now. There were reports that Jordan Kyrou was made healthy scratch in St. Louis.
He was scratched tonight.
So, and their captain, Braden Shen, he's 34. He's got 2 years left at $6.5 million. Seems to, at least on paper, an interesting candidate for what he provides. But then again, he's not exactly the fastest dude.
He's not. Band. He's their captain.
Yeah,
in St. Louis.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, he's the other guy's the captain in Pittsburgh. You're aware of that, right?
Yeah. But
it's
a different situation, I think. St. Louis hope to be competitive this year. I mean, that's the thing. Like, they're not entering into a rebuild. They're trying to come out of like a retool and hit the upswing. Whereas Pittsburgh, frankly, if there's one person who's annoyed by their start, it's probably Kyle Dubas. It's really the one guy who's put out here, and he can say everything he wants, and this is great, and we're getting the best of both worlds, blah blah blah. It's like it's garbage. Like, he would prefer that he be in a position to kind of turbo boost his rebuild via his captain, and so it's. But that's a tricky situation, and it would take the captain saying, "I want out," and this is not helping that. So. But it's the point being that tying this to Dach, which has always been both ours and everyone's assumption that the play of Dach necessarily means that, it correlates to their desire to go out and get a center. I don't think it's that closely attached anymore. Listen, we have you all here. I'm really impressed with how quiet you've been while we've talked. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So, all right. We got Sid up here. Hello, Sid.
All right.
Did you write your questions out beforehand?
I did.
I am impressed. That's fantastic.
All right. So when comparing the team's performance to the final 13 games of last season, the offensive production has clearly taken a major step forward, while the underlying defense results have remained relatively consistent. Do you view the stability of the defensive side as a deliberate choice by the coaching staff that preserves structure while allowing controlled offensive expansion? Or does it suggest that the defensive system has plateaued? And as a follow-up, looking long-term, where do you think the next layer of adjustments needs to occur?
Wow. It's a good thing. That's a good thing you wrote that out in advance.
Shout out to ChatGPT.
Yeah, right on.
So it's a yes or no question, right?
I think the interesting part of the question is has the defensive system plateaued? I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think you might be onto something. But for it to plateau, like, it had to reach that plateau, right? And so, like, I think they've only just reached it. So for plateau has a negative connotation, but plateau means you've reached a certain level. If it continues at that same level for a long time, that's an issue. But we're talking about a few weeks here where they've hit a plateau, and frankly, I think they'd be really happy to continue along on a plateau. It's obvious based on how he was talking last season that Martin St. Louis has a defensive system in mind that he would like to play when he has the players to play it, and he's getting there. This, coming back to the Arbor versus Struble thing, like, to me, Struble is probably better equipped to defend the way that Marty wants to than someone like Xhekaj. And so I don't know if that answers your question. I just think, but I do agree though that the whole the notion of a plateau might be true, but I see a plateau right now as like a positive as opposed to a negative.
Yeah, on that I will add that there's definitely been an improvement in the defensive zone when it comes to a lot of talk. There was a lot of talk about the hybrid defense and how it was simplified and to make it more of a man-to-man defense, and the concepts got easier to grasp for the players, and you could tell as last season went on how they mastered it, and they pretty picked up where they left off so far this season, and they've been playing better in their own end. I think the main gain that they can have in the defensive aspect is the contribution of the forwards, especially when they lose the puck and the other team proceeds to start their transition and their counterattack. There's a focus on the F3, so the highest forwards in the offensive zone, the one that's ready to come back and put some back pressure to make sure to help the defenseman and make sure that the counterattack doesn't even reach the Canadian zone. I think that the way that they defend in the neutral zone is really where they want to make the biggest gains this year, as much more than how disorganized they used to be in the defensive zone and how much better they got. At this point, it's really how can we press the opponent and contain them in the neutral zone before they reach our blue line. And you could tell that this definitely was an issue against Philadelphia. And for the better part of this game tonight, it was too, because they let the Devils, really take a lot of speed in the neutral zone. They gave up the defensive blue line on more than one occasion. It wasn't as bad as against Philadelphia, but that's where I would say that they have not plateaued, because that would be an issue if they did, because this is one part of their defensive system where they really want to improve this season. That's it. Hey.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for hosting this. Great night.
What was your name again? Sorry.
Mohammed.
Mohammed.
Just a question. It kind of goes along with Sid's question and some of the stuff you guys alluded to about because we put a lot of focus on roster construction, obviously because we're in the latter stage of a rebuild. But I was kind of interested in seeing how you guys feel in terms of Martin St. Louis as a head coach, how he himself progressed, because obviously it's his first real job in the NHL. And in terms of where we're at in the rebuild as a coach, where you feel that his the areas he still needs to work on to perhaps be able to help us bring a championship to Montreal. You kind of alluded to that a little bit in regards to the fine details, the 6-on-5 and stuff like that. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
You want to start? Or?
Sure, I can start. I think we should hold this because
okay, do that.
Yeah. Well, I think he's when he was hired, it was clear to everyone that he was going to grow with the team, right? So the team is growing, he's growing. I think progress was not waiting 20 games to put Ivan Demidov on power play 1. That showed that I think he realized that he waited maybe a little, he would never admit this, and he would probably cringe to hear me say this, but I think he realized he waited a bit too long with Lane, that he was trying to make a point. He made his point, and beyond that, he kept making the same point that he had already made. In Demidov's case, it was clear what a difference maker he could be for them, and as soon as he went on power play 1, they became. Obviously they didn't score a power play goal tonight, did they? No. Nope. So prior to tonight, they were rolling at above 50% since Demidov went on the first unit. So these are little things that I think he's going to continue learning as this team takes steps. But I think where he's at right now is establishing a baseline. And not having experience in that, I don't necessarily see it being reflected, but because I think he has a lot of experience in standards of excellence. This is something that he knows intimately well. And I think this is something he has a lot of experience establishing on teams, just as a player. But the fact that he did that as a player gives him enormous currency to do that with his players. And so it's, maybe strategically, maybe tactically, there's certain things that he could improve on. Actually, there definitely are. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but it's not a perfect coach. But he always wants to learn. He's always looking for new ideas. And he has the utmost respect of his room and has the gravitas to get them to fall in line. So in that sense, he's kind of the perfect coach for this group, but he's still a young coach, so there's going to be learning, there's going to be growing pains, there's going to be learning curves. And I think the Canadiens are ready to live with those.
It's fascinating to me to see how Marty has evolved. When he first arrived, the first thing that he realized was that the team's morale was very low, and it was important, at least to finish the first season, the 2022 season, that the players have fun. So I remember so many practices where he would bring the nets closer together and organize mini games. And the idea basically was to learn for their players to play in tight areas, understand how to make decisions and manipulate the puck when they have no room. So this was an idea or a concept that he wanted to develop, but eventually he stopped using that method in order to express his point, because he saw that the team was at a further point. So when Arpin says that he has evolved with the team, it's not that he has changed drastically as a coach, but he's kept his finger on the pulse onto what the team needed at a particular time. So first it was working on the morale, and then after that he had a shopping list of concepts and ideas that he wanted to put forth and have his players adhere to. Some of them he might have chosen to leave behind, but for the most part, I think that he made his players understand what he wanted. And after that, he had the luxury of time to tweak them and turn it into a detail. So he doesn't having a team that for the most part remains the same from one year to another. That enables him, he doesn't have to start from scratch from one season to the next. And it can be, you guys know what I'm talking about. You guys know what I want, my ideas and all that. You're buying in, but now that you know, let's just focus on little details, on little tweaks. So that's part of the process too. It's also a coach who's learning from his mistakes. It has not gone unnoticed how he mentioned at the beginning of this preseason how he messed up last preseason, how he did not organize his team properly so that they would be ready for game one. And he went about it a different way this time around to make sure that the team would start on the better foot. And clearly the results have shown that he has. And the last thing is that this is not a man who has definitely necessarily changed his beliefs a lot, but he's using different words. And he takes each offseason as an opportunity to figure out new ways to spread his message and use new expressions, new images, so that his message doesn't get stale. The ideas might remain the same, but the ways to communicate it, the examples that he's going to use, the vocabulary, it will change. And you can tell that it remains fresh because after that, after we hear him talk about it, his players repeat the same words. And they used to repeat certain images 2 years ago that are different images now. So it's also a sign of a coach who's improving and learning on the way, is that he knows the importance of not getting his message stale. And this is actually something that Lindy Ruff used to do very well in his first stint in Buffalo. That was a key to his longevity, and at least the first time in Buffalo, how he was able to refresh his message. And Marty's very good at that. So I think that, yeah, there's plenty of stuff that he can do better, but I think those are key things that made him a better coach now than what he was 4 years ago. All right. Yes, Russ. Hey.
Hi, I'm Russ. I have two questions. One's a bit quick. So that's the quick one first. Is
21.
Got it. That's the answer to both questions. 42. Is getting a Bedard, Celebrini, Suzuki line at the Olympics a pipe dream? That's question one. Yes or no?
I would say it is a pipe dream.
Yeah.
I would be very surprised. I mean, it'd be great if one of the three's there. It'd be amazing if two of the three were there. For sure, all three won't be there. I would think that if we have to choose between those three, I think that Suzuki and Celebrini have an edge over Bedard. Celebrini is just an amazingly well-rounded player for his age. I mean, he's already one of the better 200-foot player in the league. So I don't know. Maybe that Team Canada will say, well, he'll have his time. We've got plenty of players to choose from, and we can allow ourselves to wait. Nick has got the advantage of having played the wing before. He can play the PK. There's a variety of roles that he can do. There might be in the calculations the number of lefties and righties. We'll see about that. But I think that between those three, he definitely is the one that has got the better shot. But I wouldn't be surprised necessarily or shocked if Celebrini managed to find a place on that team. But at the same time, I mean, they're allowed 25 players instead of 23, like at the Four Nations. Maybe at the 25th spot, they'd say, well, we'll give it to Connor Bedard just as for experience. But I'd be very surprised if both Celebrini and Bedard got a spot.
That sums it up.
Cool.
Yeah.
Next question. Thank you.
You can answer the next one.
Next question. You mentioned last week or the podcast previous a few players who've had like new roles, so like Anderson and Newhook, who like have sort of had to adapt their roles. Is it possible to build a contending team with converted players, who converted their roles, or is it a better approach to acquire players who have that talent, who have that kind of role already? And I don't have an answer for this. I'm asking you. I have no opinion on this.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
That's why
And also, I should say thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. We're all having a great time. Thank
Oh,
you so
great.
much
Awesome.
for doing this.
We're also having a
Looking
great
forward to
time.
the next one. Thank you
Yes,
so much.
right on. So yeah, to answer your question, the reality is that the roles that you're referring to, almost every player who plays those roles had to adapt to that role at some point. Players who reach the NHL are generally offensively gifted. They're generally on their top lines of their teams coming up. And when they reach the NHL, they have to find where they fit in the league. And the process Alex Newhook is going through right now is a very normal process in the NHL. It's happened countless numbers of times where first-round picks, and I always make the comparison with Lars Eller, but he's not the only one. Like Lars Eller was chosen right around the same place in the first round as Newhook was, and it took him years to accept the fact that he's going to be a third-line guy. And, you know, once he got his head around it, became like arguably the best third-line guy. So like that's a process that happens constantly. Like very few people who kill penalties in like midget hockey make the NHL. Like it's like the reality is that you're on PP1 and midget, you're the offensive guy, you're the go-to guy. And as you go up ranks, you fall in line and you have to figure out a role. And, you know, I mean, there are exceptions, obviously. Like Jake Evans has known since he was like 20 that he was going to be a penalty killer in the NHL. But a lot of cases, these guys need to adapt and need to figure out where do I fit in the NHL. And like Josh Anderson might have approached 30 goals once, it would be wrong for him to think like I'm going to be a perennial 30-goal scorer, right? And the role that he has now is probably more in line with what he always should have been setting out to do. Newhook, but you need that realization. You need that moment to be like, okay, I'm not going to be a star. I'm not going to be the offensive guy I always was. I'm not, and Newhook's not there. Go ask Alex Newhook today if he thinks like offense is not an important part of his game, and he'll stare daggers through you. Like it's honestly like he's not ready to accept that, and maybe he's right to not ready to like look at how he's producing right now. So it's like, but yeah, like your question is an interesting one, and there's definitely that. Like I mean, I'm sure if you ask Daniel Briere, he'd be like, yeah, go acquire those guys, go give him $5 million for a year, you know, and like look at Christian Dvorak's doing great there. But even Christian Dvorak was a supremely talented offensive player in junior, you know, and like it took him some time to realize this is my niche and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a face-off guy. I'm going to kill penalties. I'm going to be reliable, and I'll have a long career. Guy Carbonneau, the list is very, very long. So I think the process the Canadiens are going through is a normal, natural one in the NHL.
Yeah, regarding Dvorak, it's interesting because when I spoke to Rick Tuckett before the game against Philadelphia on Tuesday, and because we had a chat on the phone when the Canadiens acquired Dvorak, and he had been coaching Dvorak in Arizona. He had been using Dvorak on the power play in the bumper position with, pretty good success. And when I told him, I said, well, in all his years in Montreal, they never used him on the power play, and they did not continue on what you had built with him in Arizona because we never saw him in the bumper. So really, okay, that's interesting. But there are injuries and guys who are underperforming, but you see him again in Philly, and he's rediscovering a little bit this offensive knack, and he's put in more offensive situations. But just to continue to ride on that comparison with Lars Eller, Arpin, would you say that Kirby Dach is to Newhook who David Desharnais was to Lars Eller? Is it similar? Like in the sense like this, I've got a teammate where he's being given more situations than me. Why is it him and not me? I'm as deserving as he is, so why is it him? In that sense.
Yeah, probably. You're probably honest. Yeah, probably. I mean, the difference being that, I mean, like Desharnais was a really good player, but if you're a first round pick like Lars Eller and you see a guy who was in the ECHL like a few years ago, and all of a sudden now, and the added wrinkle in Montreal that he's French and the French media love him, and there's like that whole element, as false as that might be, he might think that. Like, who knows if he thought that? And so, but there's no doubt that Lars Eller thought that he deserved more of an opportunity or he deserved the opportunities that David Desharnais was getting. It's possible Newhook thinks that, and it's possible he thinks that Dach keeps getting all these chances, and why isn't it me? But on the other hand, Dach's riding shotgun with the most talented player in the organization. Like, I mean, he's got the crown. I mean, Newhook has on his line the crown jewel of the organization. So I don't know if he can really make that argument now, but that's clever on your part. That's a clever comparison. Yeah.
A broken clock is right twice a day. So
okay, we'll try and get all these questions in before we shut her down. But
yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Ryan.
Yes. Hello, Ryan.
So it's going to be about 4 years since Trevor Timmins has been let go as the head scout for amateur scouting.
Holy cow, that's true. That's crazy.
At the end of this month
to write the final chapter, and what is the final chapter?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, well, listen, even the pick that got him fired, right? Got them a player. Like, I mean, he had value. Like, that was a valuable pick, as misguided as it might have been, and not well thought through. Let's say, to be kind. That was like, I mean, I think his track record overall is pretty good. It's not excellent. It's not terrible. It's good. I think it's even, it's good. It's good, verging to very good, I think. Like, I think everyone has misses in the draft. They drafted some good players. They drafted Cole Caulfield. They drafted Caden Gooley. Like, a lot of the important players on this team were drafted by Trevor Timmins. So I think overall his track record's pretty good. What do you think? You're more of a draft guy than me. So.
Well, I think that there are two things that hurt Trevor Timmins' legacy. The first one is that for the first 2/3 of his time in Montreal, actually, no, let's say 2/3 of Burge's time as general manager, he did not have a lot of picks to deal with. And the more picks you have at your disposal, the more chances you have at finding players. And the reality is, I look from certainly from from 2010 to 2017, it was like 6 picks, 7 picks. Didn't have like a solid number of picks to work with, and some of them were further down. He did not have a lot of impactful players during that span. Mikhail Xhekaj obviously being the one exception to that. I think what really was painful was that on 2 separate occasions, the Canadiens needed a centerman, and they forced down everybody's throat that they would draft a centerman because they thought that he would be the guy. Alex Galchenyuk and Jesper Kotkaniemi. And those 2 selections at number 3 overall did not pan out. So in Trevor Timmins' resume, obviously it doesn't help. I think that he had very interesting picks further down. He was not necessarily the guy who hit a lot of home runs in the first round, apart from obviously 2007. I mean, you could put the list of his 2007 selections, and I think it's going to be his epitaph on his grave. There's going to be McDavid, Pacioretty, Subban, Weber, McDonough. Yeah, McDonough.
McDavid would have been
amazing.
Yeah.
So McDonough, Pacioretty, Subban, Weber. That's pretty good for one draft. After that, though, it's been a bit more difficult. But you look like further down. I mean, Jake Evans, a 7th round pick, he panned out. Kapanen, yeah, that was his last draft, right?
Yeah.
Kapanen, yeah, so at the end of the 2nd round too.
Struble.
Dobesh was a 5th round pick. You know, there are some very interesting. Even Jordan Harris, 3rd round pick was pretty good. And also a couple of gutsy moves. I think that Alexander Romanov was a very good selection, and it's something I remember talking to a scout who said, "Oh, that guy. We did not have him even on our list, like at all." So it really came as a selection out of left field from Montreal, and I mean it was good. And also, Kaiden Guhle looks like an obvious pick now as a 1st round pick. But honestly, going back to he was drafted number 16 in 2020. There were a lot of good players available, and as it's the case all the time in Montreal, year after year, is who's the Quebec kid that's available that we're going to ignore in order to draft another player. It's something that recurrent, but if you go back year after year, the Canadiens were right to draft whoever they drafted instead of the Quebec player, because I remember that draft there was a lot of talk around the Hendrix Lapierre, and honestly today I'd rather have Kaiden Guhle than Hendrix Lapierre. So, but honestly, Galchenyuk, Kotkaniemi, and Mailloux, those are the 3 main selections that you could really that hurt him the most, and the rest would be the lack of picks for a good portion of his tenure in Montreal. I'm not sure if the final chapter is written. Probably that Oliver Kapanen is going to write the epilogue, I suppose.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Oh yeah, okay. Oh, there's a line. I didn't know there was a line. Okay, sorry.
Hi, my name's Dylan. This is more of a fun theory question, without considering necessarily what we got for those players or how much it would cost to sign. Which player have we traded away or not re-signed in this rebuild that you think would help the Habs roster the most? Because I can't help but sometimes watch and go like, oh, Kovacevic would have blocked that shot, or Lehkonen would have done a good forecheck, or maybe Armia would have helped on the penalty kill. And it's just like a fun thought experiment of what player do you think would really help this roster right
Okay,
now.
can I flip your thought experiment?
Absolutely.
Okay, so my initial reaction to that question, and when you mentioned Lehkonen in particular, is that you have to not only look at the player that was either traded away or unsigned, but you have to look at the state of the team when that happened. Yes, you could argue that maybe the Canadiens should have re-signed Artturi Lehkonen, that he's a player you win with, that he would help a rebuild. There's lots of arguments to be made to not have traded him. However, in the phase that they were in, it was, I think, justifiably difficult to see giving him a long-term contract, devoting a lot of money to him without ever knowing that you're going to be in a position to make him useful. He's not useful on a rebuilding team. He's useful on a winning team. And so to get some value out of him and get what they thought was a very good defensive prospect, it turns into that they were able to flip him to get an actual good defenseman. So that was good. But it's the timing of it and the context of that deal defines that deal to me. Like, to me, it was like, I was talking to scouts that whole year, and they were all salivating over Artturi Lehkonen. Like that, like I was like, you can build up an auction for this guy and get tremendous value out of him. I'm not sure they did that as much as they could have. Maybe that's the critique, but for sure the Canadiens could use an Artturi Lehkonen today. But that's easy to say now. Like, I mean, it's,
They could definitely use him today.
Right, but but at the time they were probably like, well, 3 years from now we could use a Justin Barron on the right side of our blue line, and that'll be fantastic. So, Kovacevic, again, you have Struble, you have Harris, you have all these young defensemen in your system. You're not a competitive team. He's not seen, rightly or wrongly at the time, as being more valuable to what the competitive team will be than the young defenseman who he is, quote unquote, blocking or standing in the way of. And someone had to go on defense. And did they pick the right guy? Maybe not. But guys still have to go today. Like, there's not enough room for all their defensemen to play. So the thought exercise is fun to do because, I'm sure Jonathan Kovacevic could have blocked that shot. But, Jaden Struble's blocking that shot now, or Xhekaj's blocking that shot. Like, it's just, you need to manage. You have an asset base to manage, and you have a roster to manage, and you have a lineup to manage. And these are all, the lineup is up to the coach, but the GM has to make it so that that's as smooth as possible. And Kovacevic, to me, was a guy who was making that more difficult. Like, as guys were going to come up, he was either going to get squeezed out or he was going to get in someone's way. And I think that's what that move was all about. You want to do that?
Yeah, but I think the Canadiens would be happy to have Artturi Lehkonen now. The other guy is Emil Heineman. I mean, as much as I like the acquisition of Noah Dobson,
he was phenomenal tonight. That might have been his best game of the season tonight.
Yeah,
he was really, really good.
Yeah,
not Emil Heineman.
No. Of course, of course. There was a hefty price to pay. 2 first-round picks and Heineman. But looking at what the Canadiens, the way they want to play, the speed, the tenacity they want, the guy who can play 200 foot, who's got a knack for the net too. There was a lot of things that he did right, and he was getting better. So I miss him in that sense. I think that he would definitely have a spot in today's lineup. But I'm perfectly comfortable with the trade as it was because it netted the Canadiens Noah Dobson, so that's fine. But yeah, Lehkonen and Heineman would be the 2 guys.
Thanks for answering.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Hey, Jason.
I'm so glad your name tag survived the night. It's still there. Yes.
So I have a bit of an easy question. I'm looking towards the Olympics, but maybe towards the 2030 Olympics, and not necessarily at players, but more towards management, let's say. Do you think Kent Hughes or Jeff Gordon maybe enter into that sort of conversation of spearheading those teams for those Olympics, or do you think it's too much of like an old boys club for them to really enter into that conversation?
I mean,
that'd be great. That'd be a great rivalry, having Kent Hughes on one side and Jeff Gordon on the other. Between the two, there is an old boys club element to it. There's no doubt, because just like the players who are asked to participate in Hockey Canada events, going to the World Championships and things like that, the players who develop a rapport with Hockey Canada tend to be looked at with a favorable eye. And the management doesn't hugely change from one Olympic cycle to the next. Sometimes there's a transition, but you've got, Doug Armstrong will be leaving his job with the St. Louis Blues. He'll pass the torch to Alexander Steen. Maybe that the same will happen also to the next Olympics. Somebody else will have to step in. But, I mean, Julien Brisebois and Don Sweeney, I'm sure will still be around. So I'm not entirely sure that Kent Hughes would necessarily be identified as a potential management guy for Canada. I see more Gordon as a guy who could, who's got the street creds, the experience. He's been there. He's got the connections all around the league. I could see him being part of the American brass team, but then again, I might be wrong. What do you think?
I think more than I would agree that. But yeah, I mean, the guy that I wonder about in this respect is not Matt. It's Marty. If in the next 5 years he manages to turn this team into a perennially contending team, does he get on the radar? Because his reputation among players is growing at an alarming rate. Like it's really quite. It's incredible how many Canadiens players get questions on him from other players on other teams. They're very curious about him. And so if the Canadiens become a winning team in that window, which is the plan, and John Cooper will still be around at that point. So, who knows if he wins gold here, maybe he becomes totally untouchable and he does not, lose that job. But I think of the non-players, I think Marty has the real potential to be on an Olympic stage, which would be really somewhat ironic. Yes. I guess. Hopefully, he doesn't come back and ask for a trade at the end. But anyhow, yeah, that's not to say that Kent Hughes couldn't or Jeff Gordon couldn't. I'm sure they could, and Gordon, I would agree, would be, I guess, the more likely of the two. But it is going to depend on how the Canadiens perform. They do take guys who have proven track records of building good teams, and so far, I got to say, most of the people around the league look at how quickly the Canadiens have transitioned out of a rebuild into potentially opening up a contention cycle, and I think most people are pretty impressed with how efficient it's been. So we'll see. Thanks, Jason.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Hey.
I'm Adrian.
Hello.
Thank you for doing this. I have two questions that are related to each other. So the
Sure.
first one is more about for you guys what your daily life looks like as a journalist.
Oh my
following
God.
the team. What you like the most, and then the second one is how you've seen the team grow for the past 4 years and how you describe the atmosphere in the team.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Would you like to describe your daily life first, and then I can do the second one?
No, well, if you describe your daily life, it'll be short.
It'll be short. I mean, I don't know how to take that, but I mean, it's basically 6 days a week of work. Actually 7 because I work on Sundays. I do the notebook on Sundays, and so which not this one, but my actual written one. It's a lot of work during the season. I have 3 kids. I have a wife. They like to see me every now and then, or they say they do. I don't see them that often during the season. Every day that you try to take off, I always manage to find a reason to go to practice. Even though I know I should take a day off, it'll be better for me. I need the rest. That happened this week twice, actually. I think I went to 2 practices both times I intended on taking a day off. No, I skipped one. I skipped the one that you went to. That's right. I managed to take a day off.
Yeah, the other one, there's a player you needed to talk to.
The player I wanted to talk to, yeah, that's right. And then the one I went to, I was actually hoping to talk to Nick, and then he wasn't skating.
Right.
Yeah, so that happens too. But yeah, it's work-life balance during the season is hard. It's not, but it's hard for players. It's hard for anyone involved in hockey.
That's true.
It's really, and so that's what. When the players see your face all the time, they might not like you, but they know you're there. You're there as often as they are, or close to it, and so that helps. There's a certain mutual respect that grows. Like, okay, they're invested. They're here. They're doing the work. We're here. We're doing the work. Like that gets noticed by players. So, do you want your daily life?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. There you go.
Well, I'm in a different situation than Arpin because I'm not strictly a writer anymore, like I was when I was at The Athletic. So being in more of a TV gig now, I split the beat with another guy at Radio-Canada. So basically we're going to work 1 weekend out of 2. I'm going to cover the early week games, and the late week games is going to be my partner Alex who does it. And when you do TV, you're working the room differently. You look at you ask different type of questions. You're looking for things that you can use on television rather than trying to dig to to understand the meaning of life with the player on a certain day. So I don't have that luxury because I've got to have my clip. So I've learned to work differently. So it's mainly sometimes I'll be on the air in the afternoon for a couple of little quick TV hits. There's going to be another one at 11 o'clock at night, and then after that, once all my TV requirements are done, then I can write my article. And so I write it roughly from 11 to 1 in the morning. And then the morning after, I'm at practice. So it's exhausting a little bit. My wife says that there's summer Marc-Antoine and there's winter Marc-Antoine. I'll let you guess which one of the two she prefers. But I mean, at the same time, it's a great gig. We're both very lucky to do what we do. We're aware of the tremendous chance that we have to be doing what we're doing, and we're dealing with a group. To answer your second question, we're dealing with a group of players right now who are extremely accommodating and responsive and kind. It's a young group that has learned to grow together. I mean, they're led by a guy who arrived, at his earliest stage of his career in Montreal, has learned from guys like Shea Weber and Carey Price, but very soon it became Nick Suzuki's team, and the nucleus developed in an environment that was quite new for Montreal, because when you have a group of young players who grow within the boundaries of a rebuild, the expectations are different. So I suspect that they did not feel the usual pressure that there is in Montreal, because the pressure to win every given night and doing your best has remained, but the expectation of result was not there for the first time in forever, and it has allowed them to acclimatize. I don't know if that's the word, but yeah, into this NHL environment and in this market with a lot less pressure, I think, than all the generations before. So it makes for a group that is kind of loose, that understands how things work, and that who are not overwhelmed by it. So each new player who arrives integrates a mood where they arrive here and say, oh, well, it's not that bad. It's not as I would have thought originally, So even a guy like Noah Dobson who arrives, he's got a few years under his belt. Yeah, sometimes there are days where he says, there's a lot of questions. It's a lot of people. He's taken aback at times, but for the most part, it was an easy integration because the mood is good. So the mood is good. It starts with the players. I think that the coaching staff has done a good job in keeping the mood good. So we're entering that room as reporters, and I don't feel like we're constantly day to day adding a crazy stress to them. Because there used to be a time where there was. I remember our group, the group of reporters. The doors open, we enter the room, and there's a player there making the sound of a cattle. So that's not very nice, to hear that and say, okay, that's how you perceive us. These times have changed, and there's a mutual respect.
Names.
Yeah, no.
Names.
I think there's a mutual respect. That's what you aim for on a day-to-day basis. You don't want to be friends with the players. You don't even necessarily want to be liked, but you want to be respected. But in return, you have to show that respect to the players and not try to, be too sneaky in the way that you approach them and ask your questions. So, but this is a very fun group to work with. And I mean, the fact that we're there so often also, they know us, they know what to expect from us. That makes a big difference. If you just show up once a month, they don't know how to approach you. They cannot gauge you. So the more often you're there, the better the relationships you can develop, and the more that they understand that, if there is stupid stuff that's that will be said. It's probably from those that they don't see day to day.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're gonna wrap it up.
Yeah.
You guys, this has been a great first event. I'm pretty confident in saying we're gonna do another one of these at some point. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to Hurley's Irish Pub for hosting us. Thank you, Trinity Adam. Hopefully you guys had a good night. And yeah, we will be we'll be back on Monday with our regular episode on Monday. But thank you all for coming, and we'll see you at the next one of these. Thanks very much.